This is a video reply to Spinalfluidontaps' last video, an active peace activists. You've mentioned before the concept of communitism, the idea of us working together in communities and instead of being essentially protected and looked after by a government, a national leadership. I pretty much agree with that. I think we'd all be much better off if we worked as communities. And your vision, what I get from your concept of it is very much like what I would like to see myself, of people working together and helping each other out. Everyone, of course, participating, working hard. And you're right, there's always going to be difficult people who always are going to complicate things, not necessarily because people are stupid, but because some people they're lazy or they are dishonest, they have their own agendas or interests or whatever else. But to me, yes, the idea of being a community-based society is so much more appealing. And it's possible that we could have representatives that truly worked for us, that would meet with representatives of other communities to discuss sharing back and forth and whatnot. In terms of military, being able to defend ourselves, I'm not sure. And you're right in mentioning the art of war. Indeed, a great book, War Being the Art of Deception. And also that it really comes down to profit. War is very expensive. And so it's a waste from a business perspective unless you can take over a culture as quickly, as inexpensively as possible, and to force their troops to surrender instead of having an ongoing war, and to try to take over their culture and to make profit back off of that culture. It's really kind of a business venture, at least, and that form of war, that reason is for profiting. As we all know about the military-industrial complex, and they make so much money off of war, and they influence through bribery and God knows what through our leaders to go into ridiculous wars that the governments themselves don't really profit off of. We don't profit off of. But anyway, I agree, and it is kind of a utopian concept maybe that we could work together as a community and for the most part get along and look after each other is a beautiful concept, and I look at it the same way. I don't know how likely that is to happen, although if you look around the world throughout history, there are examples of that, of people working together as a community, and one family is having a hard time getting through the winter, the other people in the community help them to get through and whatnot, and it can work. And sometimes tough times bring out the best in people, especially since logically anyone could be in a tough time, and so it benefits everyone selfishly to help each other, because then their turn might come and they might need help. So even people who might ordinarily not be that giving or well-intended might actually help others for their own personal reasons. So it actually might work out. You've also mentioned good people do nothing. How can people be good if they do nothing? The concept of good people doing nothing. Yeah, it's very interesting. The thing with you in your videos is that you're always so honest and straightforward, forthcoming, and that's really good. It's refreshing, and that's a really good point. Is there such a thing as good people who do nothing? I do think a lot of people are very distracted though by problems of their own and complex problems, and I know a lot of people use that as an excuse, but I think it is true to a large extent. And I also think there is something that I call mass low self-esteem, of which I really blame the education system, and you brought this up before, this issue, and I went into that a little bit. Basically as children, we're kind of, our spirit is broken and then we're molded, although some of us can resist it, but the idea is to break the spirits and to mold these kids into becoming mindless, obedient workers - consumers. Basically, low self-esteem, and that they feel like, oh, who am I? I'm nobody, and an important issue comes up, whether it be philosophy. I mean, God, children can discuss philosophy. It's only thinking, is all it is. And then there's politics. Everyone has opinions on politics. Everyone has opinions on what could be a better society. But people get so modest, and they admit that they could discuss these subjects, but they they feel small inside. I swear, I've seen that so much. People are distracted, and they are taught and trained to be mindless little worker and consumers, but they're capable of so much more, but they don't really know. It's not that they don't know how to be more, but they're afraid to be more. They're afraid to stand up and say no. It would be like in a classroom, a small child standing up in front of the teacher and saying, I don't want to do this, I don't see the point. Much of our character is shaped, obviously, through our youth. And they know that. And so kids are institutionalized and built into feeling that they're nobody. Now, you're not good enough. You have to be molded into something that you're not if you're going to make it in this society. And that's pounded into their brains, that they've got to be molded and lose touch with who they really are. And that creates a feeling of a lack of self-worth. That people are always trying to achieve that through various materialistic goals. Consumerism, and also trying to reach a position that they don't really deserve, however they can get into a feeling important. And everyone's always striving for something great, as you mentioned in your video. And self-help books, all these things come along to offer the answer. But it's really the self, I think, the true self that people are lacking, that they really want. True love, which isn't just for another person, it's in your own heart, as corny as that might sound. You can be absolutely happy and content just being by yourself, being alone. You don't necessarily feel a need for anything. And I think a lot of the need that we feel to be successful, whatever, is really some kind of validation, some kind of acceptance of who we are within the community. So there is the low self-esteem part of it of, I'm not good enough, but there's also the desire to be accepted for who you really are, which you never really are in a society that doesn't really want you. Everyone expects you to play the game, to pretend to be something that you're not. So people want to be accepted as who they are as well. And some people feel they can only get that through a position of authority or to being successful, pretending to be successful. So in my opinion, what's under the surface is actually something quite beautiful and innocent if you look at it, but on the surface it's kind of ugly, it's lies, it's BS, and it can be very cold. But I think, as corny as it might sound, I do believe that we're all pretty good people underneath it all. But I know a lot of people, from the time they're born innocent into this world, they really lose their way and they become monsters. But I think that what drives all of us is something that is fairly innocent underneath it. You also mentioned the lie of patriotism, and that's, I think, one of the most controversial things you've said here. Controversial certainly to patriotic Americans, and different people I've known on YouTube are very big on patriotism. That's a very good point. I wasn't quite sure myself to make a video on that. I wasn't sure what to say, because there is something about patriotism, being proud of your culture, of your society. I do feel pride in being Canadian, However, I would be happier living in a happier society, mind you. If Canada were to break up in a sense and we were to become more community-based, I would be happier and more prideful to be in a happier, more natural community instead of a country that increasingly to me feels, dare I say, fascist, especially under Stephen Harper. Anyway, some of us may be utopianists, if that is a word. Utopianism, the idea of a better world, of society where we can all live together, work together, and be fairly happy and decent and honest instead of all this dishonesty and whatnot. And I think we can have that. We have had it through history now and again, and I think we can be there again. We just perhaps need to discuss it enough and to open our minds to it enough, and maybe circumstance will take us in that direction. Peace.